Here's an NA Miata, and these are 5 pros and cons of things that you might run into when purchasing this car. These things are very easy to drive. When we first got it, I had no idea how to drive manual, and Lita did, but she hadn't driven it in a while. But she was able to drive it just fine with a lot of give, and to this day, she still drives it very well. As for me, while I'm still learning, it's extremely forgiving, and I found it to be very easy once I get used to it. Stalling out is pretty difficult, and the pedals give a lot of room for error. These things are old. They were made from 1989 to 1997, so they're all above 30 years old, but the 89 model is creeping up on 40 years old. And because these things are old, and because a lot of them are used for project cars, a lot of them are not in the best condition. Take ours, for example. The outside has been repainted and has a ton of scuffs, the brake lights aren't in the best condition, the interior was spray painted and also has this weird adhesive shit on it that we're still trying to get off, and the windows were cleaned with steel wool. Now, of course, this can also be a positive thing, as our Miata was manual swapped and has an aftermarket exhaust that I think sounds pretty cool. We do plan on fixing all of this stuff plus more in the future. I mean, in fact, we've already started. For example, the secondary fan was melted when we bought it, and we've already fixed it. It's a slow process, but we're fixing it bit by bit. But multiple owners is just one outcome of old age. This thing is just prone to breaking more, whether it be rust or in the interior or in the engine bay. It's just gonna be more fragile than other cars.
Wow.
Oh my God. It's very compact. This thing can fit under an 18-wheeler if it wanted. It's one of the smallest cars I've ever seen on the road. It takes corners great, it's easy to park, and it's pretty cozy inside. I could also see it being compact as a con though, as it's hard for other drivers to see this thing, and if it gets in a wreck, I don't think we would make it out alive, at least if it's a really bad one. If you're on the taller side, it's also very hard to get out of and kind of hard to drive. Sorry, this is the pro section. I forgot, so I'm labeling it being compact as a pro. We have to drive a lot on campus, which means we need to use parking garages. And driving in those things in my big ass SUV is very hard and kind of worrisome. And the Miata, it's a walk in the park. And as I said earlier, it handles great, especially on curvy roads, which makes driving and riding in it a lot more fun than any other car that I'd say I've driven in, even on the same roads. Rust. Probably the most notorious issue on this thing due to a multitude of factors. For one, as I've talked about, they're old. They've been in all types of weather for over 30 years, so most of them are going to have a tiny bit of rust. Even if it's been garage kept its entire life, it probably still has rust. These things rust just by existing, but it's also due to the design. Taking a look back here, these are the rear rocker panels, and they're notorious for rusting out because of how small the drain is. Water then gets caught up behind the rocker panel, and the car will rust inside out until a hole gets here. And this is just one of many examples on this car where water can collect and cause rust. Or water doesn't collect, but the car still rusts anyways just because it feels like it. No, it's really just due to poor design and old age. There's not an issue that these things have had that someone else hasn't had before and hasn't posted online. There have been times that Lita and I have been driving this thing and it starts making the weirdest sound coming from the most obscure area possible. And we'll then look it up and we'll find like a Reddit post or something with a few hundred upvotes where people are having the exact same issue and they have ways to solve said issue. This thing is baby's first project car. And we've got it even easier because we live close to a place called R-Speed where they specifically look at Miatas. If you want to get into the car scene like me, then I highly suggest getting a Miata because they're super easy to work on. But again, this is my first project car, so there are probably cars that are easier to work on and are better for a first project car. These things are slow as shit. They have dog water performance, and while they can be modded to push out some good stats, I'm talking about the raw stats of this thing. And the raw stats tell me that this thing is a shitbox. It doesn't matter to me because I think driving them is really fun, but if you want to get notable performance out of them, you need to either turbo it or LS swap it. Comment if we should take our Miata and put the Tahoe engine inside of it. I don't care that the Tahoe's engine bay is half the size of the Miata. If the comments want it, we'll deem it so.
Yeah!
Not only are these things easy to work on and to pinpoint exactly what's wrong with it, but they're also just fun to work on as well as to mod. This could be said about any project car that one has, so it could be argued whether or not it should be on the pro list. But because it's my first project car, I'm gonna put it on the list. You can find pretty much everything you need for this specific car online and on Facebook Marketplace, and even places like RSpeed have parts you can directly buy in person, which is way better than clicking order on a screen. And while the car looks like, yeah, it's not a car I'd want to try and make look cool with a body kit or anything. Of course, these options do exist if you're someone who does want to do that. But like I said, you can find anything you need for this car, new or used, OEM or off-brand. It makes the planning and eventually rebuilding of this car so exciting because we feel like there's unlimited possibilities of what we can do with this thing. The top. Now, for those of you who don't own a Miata, you might be wondering why the top of this thing is one of the main cons about it. Well, that's because these things out of the factory came with two tops, a soft top like this and a hard top. And each of these tops has one major flaw. Soft tops are extremely prone to leaking due to their old age and the fact that they're just so fragile now, and hard tops are extremely fucking expensive. Obviously, if you're able to afford a hard top, then I say go for it. You can always take it off whenever you want if you want to feel the wind in your face more than just putting the windows down, and I haven't heard anything about these things specifically leaking like the soft tops do. Plus, I think they look better. Soft tops, while having the advantage of just being able to be put down whenever you want, are extremely old, they're very prone to wear and tear, and they also leak. Specifically around this area, water gets in very easily. So if the rust issues on this thing weren't bad enough already, it's also prone to leaking, which causes more rust.
Wow.
The final pro to this car is this. The final con to this car is simply the money. Yeah, they're not terribly expensive to work on and buy things for, but that's in regards to other cars. This thing, in just the 5 months that we've owned it, has cost us a ton of money in replacement parts and repairs and such. And now we have to spend over $6,000 on a new engine. I am just so excited. And that's also more than how much we paid for this car. This thing was about $5,000. If you do not have a savings specifically for this car, you are getting yourself into a literal money pit. It's smart to read up on money books and do research on how to spend and save smart. And while spending $6K on a new engine isn't the smartest thing, we are saving money for it and we want to restore this car. If the same thing happened to my Tahoe over there, I'd probably just get a new car because it's not the same as an old vintage car like this. Maybe in the future people are going to want to do that with 2008 Tahoes, but I highly doubt that. I've gotten a few comments about why we don't just sell this thing because, I mean, yeah, $6,000 is a lot of money to put into a car like this, but we've gotten kind of attached to it, and it's a project car that we want to restore and bring to its former glory and maybe even better. Plus, we wouldn't even be able to sell it for much because it has rod knock, so the price of it already goes down significantly. But if we replace this engine, it's basically like getting a new car. Yeah, the body still has the 300,000 miles that this car does, but the engine itself is going to be brand new.